The air hangs thick with incense, a cloying veil that clings to your skin like regret. You stand in the shadowed heart of Memphis, where the Nile's breath whispers through columned halls, carrying the low hum of chants from priests in linen robes. Flickering torchlight dances on walls etched with bulls and gods, their eyes seeming to follow every step. Then, a rumble deep, resonant, like thunder trapped in flesh. The ground trembles faintly as the Apis bull emerges from his pen, his black coat gleaming under the sun, disk between curved horns, a living god among men. The crowd parts, murmurs rising like a tide. Women press forward, their anklets chiming softly, while scribes clutch papyrus rolls, inscribing the moment. The bull pauses, nostrils flaring at the scent of barley offerings and myrrh. He is Ptah made manifest, the creator's breath in muscle and sinew. But tonight, the air shifts. A foreign wind cuts through the sacred haze, sharp with dust from distant sands, laced with the metallic tang of Persian steel. Footsteps echo, heavy and unyielding. A figure strides into the light, his cloak embroidered with golden lions, eyes narrowed against the flame. Cambyses, king of kings, halts before the beast. His hand rests on a dagger hilt, casual as a lover's touch. The bull lows once, a sound that vibrates in your chest, echoing the heartbeat of Egypt itself. The priests freeze, their chants faltering. Cambyses smiles, but it's no warmth that splits his face like a crack in stone. "This," he says, voice low and edged, "is your god?" The blade whispers free. The bull shifts, muscles coiling like the Nile before flood. And in that suspended breath, the world tilts. What fury births this moment? What machine of empire grinds beneath the spectacle? The answer waits in the sands beyond, where conquests bloom like desert thorns. But hold, because the strike hasn't fallen yet, and when it does, empires will shudder. What you're about to hear involves sacrilege against the sacred, the unraveling of rituals that bound a people to their gods, and the cold machinery of rule that turns devotion to dust. These events, drawn from ancient whispers and stone-carved truths, unsettle. If they press too close, step away, I respect that. For those who stay, we peer not to revel in ruin, but to map the gears, how power devours what it claims to protect. This wasn't mere conquest, a clash of spears and sands. This was erasure, etched in the marrow of a land where gods walked as beasts. In the fading light of Egypt's 26th dynasty, around the year 525 before the Common Reckoning, the Persian tide broke upon the Nile. Cambyses, son of Cyrus the Great, had inherited an empire stitched from Medes, Babylonians, and Lydians, a vast web of satrapies pulsing with tribute and tribute roads. His father had conquered with mercy's mask, freeing slaves from Babylon's yoke, but Cambyses saw the Nile not as kin, but as the final jewel in a crown already heavy with gold. Egypt, under Pharaoh Psamtik III, stood as the last unbowed realm, its temples swollen with grain, and priests wielding more sway than kings. The stakes? Survival of the old ways. For Egypt, the Apis bull wasn't cattle, it was the pulse of creation, Ptah's earthly echo, heralding floods and harvests. To touch him was to claw at the cosmos itself. For Cambyses, subduing this land meant chaining the gods to Persian will, proving an upstart dynasty could humble the eternal. Echoes ripple forward. Empires still fracture faiths to forge unity, turning sacred groves to quarries for their monuments. This tale, then, reframes the blade's arc not as a tyrant's whim, but as the hinge where reverence bends to rule. And in that bend, we glimpse the machine, bureaucracy's quiet blade, sharper than any dagger. Long before the torchlight trembled in Memphis, the machine hummed in Persia's high plateaus. Picture the Achaemenid realm, in those early years of Cambyses' reign, a colossus, spanning from the Indus to the Aegean, its heart in Pasargadae, where Cyrus lay buried under watchful cypresses. By 530, when his father fell to Scythian arrows in the eastern wastes, Cambyses stepped into shadows long enough to swallow a man. He was no stripling. Already, as regent in Babylon, he had gripped the scepter at the New Year's rite, letting Marduk's priests crown him in borrowed glory. The empire? A marvel of clay tablets and royal roads, where satraps tallied taxes in silver siglos, and spies called the king's ears whispered of unrest from Susa to Sardis. But beneath the order lurked fractures, Cyrus had woven tolerance like a tapestry, restoring temples, sparing kings' blood, but his death left threads frayed. Whispers of rival heirs stirred. Cambyses, ever watchful, moved first. His brother Bardi, a trusted governor of the eastern marches, met a quiet end, slain in secret before the Egyptian sails even stirred. The Behistun rock, carved later by Darius, claims it so, a mercy killing, lest blood divide the house. Yet, in the courts of Ecbatana, tongues wagged of paranoia, of a king haunted by his father's ghost. Cambyses wasn't forged in fire, he was tempered in its afterglow. As a boy, he watched Cyrus parade Median captives, learning that mercy bought loyalty, but fear sealed it, a formative scar. The loss of his mother Cassandane, who died young, leaving him to vow before her pyre that he'd eclipse her sorrow with glory. "I'll drag the world's wonders to your feet," he swore, or so the tales murmur. That vow, twisted in Babylon's heat. There, as viceroy, Cambyses navigated priests who bowed but bridled, their ziggurats hoarding wealth his father had spared. He learned the calculus. Gods demanded tribute, but empires demanded more. A rebellion in the south, stifled with swift blades, taught him the edge of preemption. By 526, with Egypt's pharaoh Amasis fading, scouts returned with maps of Nile granaries, tales of Apis festivals, drawing crowds like rivers to the sea. Conquest wasn't whim, it was arithmetic. Egypt's wealth could fund eternal watchtowers against eastern nomads. Its priests co-opted to bless Persian rule. Cambyses assembled the machine, Phoenician hulls for the fleet, Ionian bows for the ranks, Arab guides for the Sinai's throat. He crowned himself in Babylonian rites, then turned west, leaving regents to tally the empire's pulse. Humanizing the crown, Cambyses shared his father's fire ambition that burned bright but isolation gnawed. No wife bore him heirs. Rumors swirled of unions with sisters, echoes of Median custom, binding blood to throne. In quiet chambers, he pored over scrolls of Egyptian lore, not with awe, but appraisal, how to bend their gods without breaking the wheel. A courtier once found him tracing a bull's horns in lamplight, murmuring, "If this is their king, what chains for its neck?" It wasn't hatred, it was hunger, the kind that hollows a man. Yet, in those moments, flickers of doubt, dreams of Cyrus, stern and spectral, demanding, "Have you built, or merely taken?" The turning point came not in thunder, but a whisper from the delta. In spring of 525, as his armies massed at Gaza, a defector arrived, Phanes, a Greek mercenary from Halicarnassus, once Amas's blade, now Cambyses' mapmaker. Over wine in a tent strung with stars, Phanes sketched Pelusium's walls, the Nile's forks, the priests' hidden granaries. "Their gods fight with words," he laughed, "but your spears speak louder." That night, Cambyses sealed the betrayal with gold, and the machine whirred to life. Scouts fanned out, camels laden with water from Bedouin wells. The pharaoh's court, riven by Amas's death and his son Psamtik's youth, splintered mercenaries bought, nobles swayed. By summer, the host crossed Sinai, a serpent of dust and bronze, 50,000 strong, their banners snapping like judgment. Memphis fell not to siege, but surrender. Psamtik, cornered in his palace, yielded after a token stand at the delta's mouth. Cambyses entered the white-walled city on a barge of ivory, crowds lining the quays in uneasy silence. He claimed the throne in Sais, Neith's temple, offering rams to her altar, a nod to custom. Scripted by Udjahorresnet, the admiral turned advisor, whose statue in Vatican marble still bears his plea: "Cleanse the foreign tread from holy ground." Udjahorresnet, our named witness, a man of salt-crusted robes and steady gaze, guided the king through rituals, whispering of Ma'at's balance. For a breath, harmony hummed. Cambyses adopted falcon crowns, decreed temple taxes halved, even gifted a sarcophagus to house the old Apis when it perished that autumn. Egypt exhaled, believing the conqueror cloaked in pharaonic skin, but the machine demanded more than gestures. Temples, bloated under the Saite kings, drained imperial coffers, priests hoarding land, festivals siphoning grain meant for Persian garrisons. Cambyses' scribes tallied. 1 in 3 harvests funneled to gods who answered no overlord. Whispers from satraps in Babylon urged cuts. Udjahorresnet warned of backlash. The king paced Nile-side gardens, papyrus rustling like conspirators. "They worship beasts," he muttered to a Persian captain. "While men starve." The decision crystallized one dawn, as a courier arrived with eastern dispatches. Unrest in Bactria, tribute delayed. Egypt's wealth must flow unbroken, or the empire's veins would clot. Thus, the edicts rolled out, quiet as floodwaters rising. Lesser shrines lost endowments. Priests from distant nomes petitioned in vain. In Memphis, the Apis cult heart of the old faith faced the blade first. Not slaughter, but strangulation. Festivals curtailed, herds culled for tribute. Udjahorresnet protested in shadowed halls, his voice a reed against stone. "The bull is Ptah's breath, sire. Starve it, and the land withers." Cambyses waved him off, eyes on horizon maps. "Gods serve kings," advisor, "or they serve none." The primary victim emerged here. Neferet, high priestess of the Apis enclosure, a woman of 40 summers, daughter of a Theban line tracing to Seti. She had tended the bull since girlhood, anointing its flanks with Nile silt, chanting hymns that coaxed rains from indifferent skies. Neferet was no warrior. Her battles were with ink and incantation, her days weaving garlands of lotus for the gods' horns. Widowed young, she poured her quiet fire into the sanctuary, training acolytes in the bull's lore, how its every bellow foretold the inundation's height. Neferet embodied the old guard's grace linen sheaths, embroidered with scarabs, hair braided with blue faience beads, a voice like wind over reeds, reciting spells of renewal. She laughed with novices over shared bread, dreamed of her lost son in the bull's dark eyes. Before the edicts bit, she led processions through Memphis's markets, the Apis' cart rumbling like distant thunder, drawing cheers that drowned tax collectors' cries. Villagers pressed forward, touching the wheels for blessing. Children trailed, mimicking the beast's gait. Neferet would pause at the temple steps, lifting her arms to the sun. "Apis lives, and so do we." Her world was rhythm dawn, feedings of clover and dates, midnight vigils where she'd whisper to the bull of harvests past. It was a life woven into Egypt's soil, fragile as papyrus, vital as the vein in your wrist. The confrontation brewed in the sanctuary's cool stone, where air pooled heavy with milk and musk. Cambyses had come to inspect the tribute herds, Udjahorresnet at his elbow, scrolls unrolled like battle plans. Neferet awaited in the forecourt, flanked by lesser priests, the Apis penned beyond in shadowed stalls. The king dismounted his chariot, dust swirling at his greaves, and strode forward, his gaze sweeping the murals of bulls trampling chaos serpents. "Show me this god of yours," he commanded, voice echoing off basalt. Neferet bowed low, her beads clinking softly, then rose with measured grace. "Great one, born of Re, the Apis is no trinket. He is the land's heart, herald of Ptah. To see him demands purity offer first, or the gods turn their faces." Cambyses paused, a flicker crossing his features. Amusement, irritation. He gestured to a servant, who proffered a ram's haunch, wrapped in gold leaf. But Neferet shook her head, firm as the enclosure's gates. "Not blood for coin, lord. The rites bind us all." Udjahorresnet interjected, voice smooth. "She speaks Maat's truth, majesty. The bull accepts only what the Nile gives freely." The air thickened, priests shifting like reeds in current. Cambyses stepped closer, his shadow swallowing her slight frame. "I am the Nile now. Your floods flow at my word." Neferet's eyes met his, steady as the bull's own defiance veiled in devotion. "Then flood wisely, king, for the gods remember." The refusal hung, unspoken thunder. Cambyses turned away, but the seed rooted. Resistance wasn't rebellion, but a thread pulling at the empire's weave. The act unfolded not in rage's blaze, but calculation's chill. Days later, as Neferet led evening ablutions pouring scented water over the Apis' flanks, murmuring of coming rains, guards sealed the outer gates. Cambyses' decree arrived on sealed clay. The bull, deemed unfit for divine service, would join the tribute herds at dawn. Neferet barred the way, her novices clustering like frightened birds. "This is desecration," she cried to the captain, a scarred Mede with indifferent eyes. "The Apis chooses his end, not men." The soldiers advanced, pikes lowered, herding the beast toward waiting carts. The bull resisted, hooves scraping stone, a bellow ripping the night that set dogs howling across Memphis. What followed blurred in torch smoke and shouts, Neferet's pleas lost to the clamor, her hands clutching the bull's halter as if prayer could anchor flesh. The priests scattered, some fleeing to hidden shrines, others standing firm till clubs fell. Udjahorresnet arrived too late, summoned by the uproar, finding the sanctuary a hush of trampled garlands and blood-flecked straw. The Apis, unbound from his godhead, lumbered into the desert under Persian whips, its lowing fading like a dirge. Neferet vanished into the cells below, her beads scattered like fallen stars. The machine turned, indifferent. One priestess, one refusal, filed as disorderly assembly. Words spread like silt after flood whispers in Theban alleys, scrawls on temple walls. The bull walks as cattle, merchants muttered in markets, their scales idle. Priests from Heliopolis convened in secret, vowing oaths over hidden amulets. This wasn't about Neferet alone, a woman's stand in linen and resolve. This was the system laid bare. Persian ledgers deeming gods as assets, satraps reporting efficiencies to Susa, where Cambyses tallied victories in ink. Temples, once self-sustaining realms, now begged for scraps, whole priesthoods disbanded, their lands seized for garrison farms. Numbers in human strokes, families of acolytes turned to beggary, festivals silenced to fund frontier walls. Udjahorresnet, pacing his quarters that moonless night, penned frantic notes to the king. "Sire, the Nile rises, not on decrees alone. The people see erasure, not reform. A modern echo whispers here in boardrooms where sacred lands yield to pipelines, where progress displaces prayer with profit. The machine grinds on, its cogs oiled by the cries it drowns." But that wasn't the fracture's first crack. Far from Memphis's morning, in the sun-baked south, the edicts echoed differently. Shift your gaze to Thebes, where columns of Amenri loomed like forgotten giants, their paint flaking under relentless blue. Here, a witness unrelated to the sanctuary's fall observed the spread. A merchant's widow named Tuya, her stall once brimming with faience scarabs and linen bolts, now barren as the quarries she'd fled. Tuya, 50 and weathered, had buried her husband in a modest tomb near Luxor, his ka sustained by temple offerings. With Psamtik's fall, she'd returned south, trading tales for bread, her ears attuned to the river's gossip. From her perch on a reed mat by the Karnak pylons, Tuya watched the machinery unfold not in blades, but bureaucracy's slow choke. Persian taxmen arrived that autumn, scrolls unrolling like serpents, demanding reallocation from Amun's vast estates. Priests, robed in faded leopard skins, argued in hieratic script. The gods' fields feed the dead as the living. But the satrap's deputy, a Babylonian with ink-stained fingers, tallied implacably, 1/3 to imperial stores, another to garrisons. Incentives gleamed, compliance earned silver darics, resistance, exile. Tuya saw the ripple, a potter's kiln cold for lack of temple clay, a healer's herbs withheld from priestly gardens. Whole villages near Hermonthis emptied, their men conscripted for canal digs, feeding Persian barges, women weaving ropes under overseers' lashes. The persecution bloomed variably, like weeds in cracked earth. In the delta, it was swift sanctuaries shuttered, idols melted, for coin. Southward, subtler. Festivals postponed till tribute cleared, leaving processional ways silent under stars. Tuya bartered with a fleeing scribe, one dusk, his satchel heavy with pilfered papyri. "They report to Ariandes in Memphis," he hissed, "who sends tallies to the king. Each bull culled, each rite skipped its ledger lines, not hatred. Numbers humanized. Not 50 shrines defunded, but empty hearths in priestly homes, children hungry where once they suckled on sacred milk." A brief moment pierced the gray. Tuya, sharing dates with a nomadic herder, laughed at his tale of a camel that knelt before a roadside shrine, untouched by edicts. "Even beasts mock the machine," she said, the irony a brief sun in storm clouds. Yet escalation whispered southward still. In Elephantine, where Nile cataracts roared like defiant gods, a different victim type emerged, a temple guard, weathered by frontier winds, who dared torch attack scroll in open court. His end? Not spectacle, but erasure. Family scattered, names struck from rolls. Tuya heard the echoes in traveler yarns, the machinery's incentives clear. Report unrest, gain land, harbor priests, lose all. The spread wasn't frenzy, but filings in a vast archive, satrap to vizier, vizier to throne, each link greased by fear of the king's ear. And in that chain, the Apis' shadow loomed largest, its absence a void, sucking light from the land. But Neferet? Rumors placed her in hidden cells, her chants silenced, yet her refusal seeded whispers. The priestess endures, as the bull once did. A breather, then the widow, pausing at a lotus pool, watching ibis fish in dawn's gold, a quiet irony amid the grind. Beauty persists, even as the wheel turns. What happened next would chill the delta's breath, for the machine, sensing friction, tightened its coils. Cambyses, from his Memphis throne, decreed deeper cuts. The Apis cult, that beating heart, reduced to shadow. No new bull sought. The old one's pen, emptied, became a granary for tribute grain. Priests scattered like chaff, their libraries seized for kindling whole tomes of star lore curling to ash. Udjahorresnet, our steadfast guide, slipped through corridors, pleading with nobles. This unravels Ma'at itself. But the king, eyes on eastern maps, waved dismissals. Let their gods fast, the empire feasts. The climax crested one equinox eve, as the Nile crested low omens ignored. In the sanctuary's husk, where Neferet's garlands still clung to walls like ghosts, a remnant gathered, a dozen priests, faces gaunt under torch flicker, circling a makeshift altar of river stones. They chanted low, invoking Ptah's renewal, their voices weaving through the musty air scent of damp earth and faded myrrh, the distant lap of water like a withheld sob. Slow time now, each breath drawn deep, the flames crackle sharpening shadows on hieroglyphs of bulls trampling serpents. Neferet, released on Udjahorresnet's bribe but unbroken, stood at center, her beads restrung, voice a thread of steel. We call the herald back, she intoned, hands lifting a clay effigy, its horns chipped but defiant. Guards burst in, iron-shod boots grinding grit, their captain bellowing orders in guttural Aramaic. By the king's will, disperse. The priests knelt, arms outstretched, chants rising unbroken. Neferet stepped forward, effigy held high. The bull hears no chains. Chaos bloomed, pikes clashing stone, cries mingling with the Nile's murmur. Sensory storm, the acrid bite of oil lamps spilling, the wet slap of blood on floors. The bull effigies shatter like bone under heel. Udjahorresnet arrived amid the fray, shoving through to Neferet. Flee, woman, the wheel crushes all. But she held, eyes locked on the captain's, her refusal a dam against flood. The act, implied in the aftermath's hush, no gore's detail, but the sanctuary's scar, altars toppled, chants choked to gasps. The captain, face twisted in duty's mask, drove his men forward, the machine's arm unyielding. Priests fell like reeds, their robes pooling dark. Neferet staggered, a pike's flat glancing her shoulder, but her gaze never wavered. You defile what endures, she whispered, as irons clamped her wrists. The peak, not blades in flesh, but the ritual's snap, the effigy's fragments crunching under boots, symbol of a faith bent but unbowed. Cambyses learned at dawn, a scroll from the satrap, order restored, 12 detained. He nodded, turning to desert dispatches, the Nile's whimper distant. The crack came subtle, a hairline in granite. Among the fallen was a novice, son to a Delta lord whose loyalty wavered. Word flew to Psamtik's kin in exile, smuggled on merchant feluccas, igniting embers in hidden gnomes. Udjahorresnet saw it first, nobles withholding grain, scribes forging tallies. The overreach? The machine presumed gods as ledgers, but faith as currency proved counterfeit. Neferet's stand, whispered in cells, birthed resistance, not armies, but absences, empty processions, silent offerings. The perpetrator fractured too, Cambyses, nights later, dreaming of bulls with hissing tongues, waking to Udjahorresnet's counsel. Sire, the land thirsts. The breaking? Neferet's unyielding eyes, echoing in the king's ear like a persistent wind. From there, the tide turned, not in flood, but ebb, leaving the empire's base slick with doubt. Cambyses' fate unraveled swift as Sinai sands. In spring of 522, eastern couriers galloped into Memphis, dust-caked and wild-eyed. A usurper in Persia, claiming Bardia's ghost, had seized the throne. Gaumata the Magian, or so the tales spun, marched with mage priests and Median bows, toppling satraps like wheat. Cambyses mounted feverishly, leaving Ariandes as Egypt's keeper, a stern Babylonian to mind the ledgers. The king rode north, through Syria's scrub, his host thinning with desertions. En route, at Ecbatana's fringes, calamity struck. Mounting his stallion, his dagger say the scrolls slipped scabbard, biting thigh deep. Gangrene bloomed black, and by midsummer he perished, whispers claiming poison or blades revenge. No heroic pyre, his body carted to Persia, interred in haste near Pasargadae, where cypresses mourned Cyrus's shade. Survivors? Neferet vanished into Theban cloisters, her chants fueling underground rites that outlasted Persian heels. Udjahorresnet, elevated under Darius, etching his pleas in stone, a bridge between worlds. The community-fractured Memphis's markets hushed, but Delta cults smoldered, birthing revolts in 522 and beyond. Power shifted east. Darius, the lance-bearer turned usurper, crushed Gaumata in a coup of 7 nobles, carving his Behistun boast on cliffs for eternity. Long-term, Egypt chafed under satraps, its temples lean but unquenched, fueling independence bids till Alexander's shadow fell. An irony lingers. The edicts meant to chain gods instead unbound them. Cambyses' sarcophagus for the old Apis gifted in pomp became priests' rallying relic, proof a conqueror could bend. The machine, oiled on sacrilege, ground to rust in memory's mill. Centuries slept on Saqqara's sands, the Serapeum's vaults yawning like forgotten mouths. Then, in 1850, a Frenchman named Auguste Mariette sent for Coptic scrolls. Waylaid by sphinx-lined paths, stumbled on bull bones amid jackal scat. Digging feverishly, torch in hand, he uncovered the catacombs. Galleries of granite sarcophagi, each a ton of hewn stone, etched with bulls' reins. 60 Apis lay mummified. From Ramesses' era to Ptolemy's twilight, cloaks of linen, amulets of gold, stelae reciting lives in hieroglyphic verse. One chamber halted him. The sarcophagus of Apis XLII, dated Cambyses' 6th year, its lid inscribed with the king's cartouche, offerings piled like pennants. Mariette, sweat-streaked and awestruck, traced the reliefs Cambyses kneeling, falcon-crowned, adoring the bull's form. No slaughter's scar. Instead, a burial befitting gods. Further digs yielded papyri, temple dockets noting reforms, not ravages, endowments trimmed, but rites intact. Udjahorresnet's statue surfaced in Rome, its plea for purity carved eternal. The find humanized the dust. Mariette, a scholar of modest means, labored nights by lamplight, piecing timelines that rewrote Herodotus's venom. Not madness, he scribbled in journals, but method a king's calculus clashing with priest's hoard. By 1851, the vaults breathed again, tourists gaping at bones that mocked old lies. Mariette's spade unearthed not just bulls, but balance. Cambyses as pharaoh, flawed but fitting the throne's curve. Why does this echo now? In an age of algorithms, auditing faiths, temples, taxed to apps, rituals reduced to revenue streams, we see the machine anew. Cambyses' blade, whether on bull or ledger, teaches power's peril. Overreach invites the crack. Resistance blooms not in spectacle, but silence Neferet's gaze, a novice's whisper, outlasting empires. Human nature, we crave gods that walk, beasts or bites, and rage when ledgers leash them. The universal, systems devour symbols, but symbols endure, seeding the soil for renewal. Egypt's bull, defiled in tale, lives in stone proof that what we break, memory mends. Return to that torchlit hall, incense curling like unanswered prayers. The bull lows no more, its pen a granary echoing with grain carts. Cambyses' shadow lingers on the walls, but Neferet's beads glint in Saqqara's sun, restrung by time. The blade fell, yet the god rose in vaults, in veins of the Nile, in the stories we refuse to bury. The victims of that night were meant to vanish, their chants scattered like chaff, but they didn't. They endure in cracked stone and stubborn scrolls, in the quiet defiance of a priestess who stared down kings. And now, they're here with you because you chose to listen, to map the machine that sought to silence them. If this shadow over the sacred stirred something in you, drop a comment below. What ancient right would you defend against an empire's grind? Your voice keeps these echoes alive. Thank you for walking these sands with me.